The endless war of the galaxy was a graveyard of fire and silence. No one remembered the day it started. No one remembered the reason. The war had lasted for so long that even the oldest archives held no record of peace. Children were born into battle, grew old watching skies burn, and died under the shadow of fleets that never rested. It was not a war fought for victory anymore. It was a war fought because it had become the only truth that every race accepted. World after world was reduced to ash. Moons were shattered. Oceans boiled away. Entire civilizations turned into dust that drifted forever between the stars. The war did not belong to one empire nor to one enemy. It belonged to all of them. Great coalitions rose, and each one promised that this battle would be the last. Each one fell. In the beginning, the galaxy thought it was only another border conflict, the kind that burned bright and then dimmed after treaties were signed. But there were no treaties. There were only new reasons to fight. Old grudges, ancient feuds, hunger for resources, hunger for power. The war spread like a disease, reaching every corner of known space. There were legends of fleets so large that their shadows covered planets. There were stories of weapons that could silence suns and turn entire systems into black voids. And still, the war never ended. The great powers of the galaxy, the towering empires of the Veyron Dominion, the cold and ancient Jal, the merciless war clans of the Krell, each believed they could end it with their strength. They were wrong. For every empire that grew close to victory, another rose to challenge it. For every weapon built to decide the war, another weapon appeared to counter it. And so the war stretched across centuries. A war without a beginning. A war without an end. The stars themselves grew tired of the endless fire. Asteroid fields glittered with wreckage of ships that no one remembered. Planets spun in silence, carrying scars too deep to heal. The galaxy became a theater of despair, where no curtain would ever fall. It was said that no war could last forever. But this one did. The strange thing was not the destruction, but the silence that followed it. When a fleet was destroyed, no one mourned. When a planet was lost, no one spoke of it. Grief had died long ago. The war was too large for grief, too endless for hope. The Jal scribes wrote in their archives, "The war is the galaxy itself. There is no outside. There is no before. There is no after." And still they fought. Every race adapted in their own way. The Veyron built ships of living metal, vessels that could heal themselves, but still they fell in flames. The Krell warclans raised soldiers bred only for battle. Their lives measured in hours, their deaths uncounted. The Tayari turned entire moons into fortresses, yet those moons were cracked open like eggs. There was no escape. But the strange question was this: why did the war not end in total collapse? Why did no empire destroy the rest and stand alone? Some whispered that the war itself was alive, a hunger in the stars that fed on endless blood. Others believed the gods of old, long forgotten, had cursed the galaxy to fight until nothing was left. And so the war continued. The galaxy grew darker. Fleets that once numbered in the thousands dwindled to hundreds, then dozens. Weapons that once burned with energy grew cold when resources ran dry. But still, the war did not stop. It slowed, it dragged, but it never stopped. In every corner, despair ruled. To be born in this galaxy was to be born into war. To grow up was to be trained for battle. To die was to die as part of a war no one chose and no one could stop. Yet something was changing. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it was there. For the first time in centuries, whispers began to spread. Whispers of an outside force, a species not yet broken by the war. A species that no one knew, but one that was beginning to appear on the edges of destroyed systems. At first, they were ignored. Their ships were small, fragile compared to the massive vessels of the empires. Their numbers were few. Their weapons seemed weak. The galaxy laughed. The galaxy mocked. What could these newcomers do that the great powers had failed to do? But those whispers did not fade. They grew stronger. They spoke of a people unlike the others. A people who fought not because of tradition, not because of endless grudges, but because they believed they could win. They called them humans. The name meant nothing at first. Just another minor race, another small flicker in the eternal fire. But the galaxy was about to learn that some flames do not die when crushed. Some flames spread even in the void. The war had no end. The war had no hope. Until the day humans stepped into it. The galaxy did not see it then. But one day all races would look back and whisper the same truth. The endless war found its end, when humanity changed everything. The galaxy in ruins. The galaxy was not only at war, it was broken. Everywhere the scars could be seen. Whole systems were reduced to silence. Planets that once shined with cities now glowed faintly with radiation. Their surfaces burned into deserts of glass. Fleets no longer looked like symbols of power. They were grave markers, drifting metal bones floating in the endless dark. Civilizations that had once been proud beyond measure were now shadows of themselves. The Veyran Dominion, who once claimed they were eternal, had lost half their empire to fire and famine. The Jal, the ancient race who measured their history in thousands of years, were forced to abandon libraries older than stars, their knowledge lost forever. The Krell Warclans, who once believed there was no honor greater than dying in battle, now threw children into warships because there were no warriors left to fight. There was no rhythm to life anymore. Only survival. On many worlds, people lived underground, far from the burning skies. They hid in caverns, building homes in stone, because the surface was too dangerous to walk upon. On others, life had collapsed into silence. Broken machines lay in the dust, forgotten by the races that had built them, and only wind moved through the ruins. Trade was gone. Communication between worlds was gone. Hope itself had become a word with no meaning. Every species carried the same thought. This is how existence will end. Not with peace. Not with unity. But with exhaustion, with the galaxy finally tearing itself apart piece by piece until there was nothing left. And still, no one stopped. It was not because they did not want peace. It was because no one believed peace was possible. The war had become part of their blood. To live without war was an idea that could not be understood. Even when empires tried to stop, the war found them. An empire that refused to fight was seen as weak, and weakness was devoured. If you did not strike, someone else would strike you. If you did not defend yourself, you would be erased, and so they fought. Not to win, not to survive, but because fighting was the only way left to exist. The ruins of the galaxy told stories without words. In the outer rim, there was a dead world called Erevan. Its surface was scarred with thousands of craters, each one left by a weapon of unimaginable size. Long ago it had been covered with forests and oceans. Now it was only dust. Orbiting above it were the remains of 3 fleets, locked together in a final battle that never ended. Wrecked cruisers drifted through the void, their lights dead, their crews frozen in silence. In the core systems, there were shattered stations that once controlled trade routes across 1,000 worlds. Now they spun slowly, torn open by fire, releasing fragments of metal and bone into space. Everywhere the story was the same: endless fighting. Endless loss. The galaxy had grown tired. And when a galaxy grows tired, it becomes dangerous in ways even war cannot explain. New weapons were made, but they were unstable, breaking the very laws of physics. Armies fought without thought, guided only by machines. Planets were destroyed not for strategy, but simply because destruction had become a habit. And yet, in this endless ruin, there were whispers of something new. It began in places far from the great empires. Outposts at the edge of known space, small colonies that had little to offer, and even less reason to be noticed. There, traders and mercenaries spoke of strangers, ships not seen before, designs unfamiliar, crews that looked different from any known race. At first, no one cared. Why should they? The galaxy had no space for new players. New species were crushed as soon as they appeared. They were nothing but insects in the fire. But the whispers grew louder. Stories spread. These newcomers fought, but not like the others. They did not fight for territory, for power, or for old grudges. They fought for each other. They fought for something greater. One Krell warlord, before his ship was destroyed, sent a message that shocked even his enemies. He said, "We faced a species that does not fear death. They do not fight like us. They do not run like us. They fight as if they believe in something none of us can see." The message ended with silence. The galaxy began to notice. The ruins were everywhere, but in the ruins there was now a shadow of change. Something small, something fragile, but something alive. The Jal, with all their ancient wisdom, called them the New Flame. The Veyran Dominion called them the Children of Madness. The Krell did not even give them a name. They only said one word with bitterness and fear: humans. No one knew where they came from. No one knew how long they had been watching. Some said they had always been there, hidden in the cracks of the galaxy, growing stronger while the great empires destroyed themselves. Others said they were newcomers from beyond known space, arriving at the worst possible time. But one truth spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. They had come at last, and the war that had lasted for centuries was about to meet something it had never faced before. Not greater weapons, not larger fleets, not endless armies, something different, something the galaxy had forgotten. Hope. First contact with humanity. The galaxy did not welcome them. It noticed them. At first, humanity appeared as nothing more than a whisper among the ruins. Their ships were small, their weapons basic, their numbers few. Against the vast fleets of the empires, they looked fragile, like sparks drifting in a storm. No one feared them. No one cared to even learn their true strength. And yet, they arrived. Slowly, carefully, their presence began to grow. Human ships were seen near burned systems where no one dared to travel. They entered debris fields and pulled survivors from broken vessels. They landed on ruined colonies and gave food to children who had known nothing but hunger. They built shelters where once there was only ash. To the galaxy, this was strange. Mercy had been forgotten. Aid had no place in war. Why would these newcomers waste resources on strangers? The answer was simple for humans, but impossible for others to understand. Because it was right. The first real contact came not through diplomacy, but through war, on the edge of Zal space. A Krell warfleet had cornered a smaller force of refugees. The Krell demanded surrender, but surrender meant death, and so the refugees resisted. They had no chance. Their ships were old, their weapons weak. It was only a matter of time before the Krell burned them out of existence. Then the humans arrived. It was not a grand fleet. Only a handful of vessels, small compared to the massive Krell warships. Their hulls bore no symbols of ancient power, no marks of empire. They were new, untested, almost fragile. The Krell laughed when they saw them, but laughter soon turned to silence. The humans fought differently. They moved in ways the Krell did not expect. Their ships were not stronger, but they were faster, weaving between enemy fire with precision. They struck not at the Krell's shields or guns, but at weak points, disrupting power lines, blinding sensors, tearing holes in places no one had ever targeted before. The Krell had numbers. They had firepower. But the humans had something greater: creativity. What should have been a slaughter became chaos. One Krell ship was disabled. Then another. Refugee vessels, inspired by the human defense, began to fight back. In the end, the Krell, unwilling to lose more, retreated. For the first time in centuries, a weaker side had survived. The galaxy was stunned. It was not the size of the victory that mattered, but the message it carried. Humans had entered the war, and they had changed the rules. The survivors told their story. Word spread fast. Whispers grew louder. The humans were not just another fragile race to be ignored. They were something else. Something that did not fit into the pattern the galaxy had grown used to. Soon, more stories followed. In one system, humans rescued a Varen convoy that had been ambushed. The Varen did not trust them, but the humans fought anyway, driving off the attackers. In another, humans entered a battlefield where Zal archives were about to be destroyed, and they risked their own ships to save knowledge that was not even theirs. Everywhere they went, they left the same impression. They fought not with numbers, not with stronger weapons, but with stubbornness, courage, and a strange sense of unity. They did not bow to fear. The galaxy began to argue about them. The Zal scholars said humanity was reckless, guided by passion rather than wisdom. The Varen commanders said they were dangerous because they did not know their place. The Krell warlords hated them most of all, calling them dishonorable tricksters who fought like shadows. But others began to wonder, could it be possible that these newcomers, so small and fragile, carried something the galaxy had lost? For humans did not only fight, they believed. They believed the war could end. They believed unity was possible. They believed tomorrow could be different from today. This belief was more powerful than any weapon. It spread through the ruins, reaching those who had long since abandoned hope. On dead worlds, survivors began to wait for human ships. On distant stations, children spoke of them as legends. The galaxy had seen countless empires rise and fall, Countless fleets burn and vanish, but never before had it seen a race that fought not to rule, not to conquer, but to save. This was the first contact. Not in words, not in treaties, but in battle, in fire, in sacrifice. And though the galaxy did not yet understand it, a new chapter had begun. The endless war had continued for centuries because no one could imagine another way. But now, for the first time, there was a race that dared to imagine it. A race that dared to act on it. The humans had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity changes the game. The galaxy thought it had seen every kind of war. It had seen battles fought with endless fleets. It had seen weapons that could split moons and silence suns. It had seen armies raised only to vanish in fire. But it had never seen what the humans brought. The humans did not win because they were stronger. They won because they were different. They studied their enemies in ways no one expected. Where the Krell charged with brute strength, humans turned their force against them. Where the Jal relied on ancient knowledge, humans used unpredictability. Where the Varen depended on living metal ships that could heal, humans learned how to cut deeper, striking faster than the metal could repair. They turned weakness into strength. Their fleets were small, but their commanders thought like no other. A battle that looked impossible became winnable, because humans refused to follow the rules written by centuries of war. In one battle near the broken moons of Draven, a human fleet of only 20 ships faced a Varen force 5 times larger. The galaxy expected them to flee. Instead, they attacked. But they did not strike the Varen head-on. They used the ruins of the shattered moons as cover, vanishing and reappearing like ghosts. Their ships struck fast and vanished before the Varen could respond. They lured the enemy deeper and deeper until the Varen ships collided with the debris and tore themselves apart. When the battle ended, the humans had lost only 2 ships. The Varen had lost 20. The galaxy watched in silence. It was not only the way humans fought, it was the way they inspired others. For centuries, no race trusted another. Alliances lasted only until betrayal. But humans spoke differently. They did not promise power. They promised something forgotten: hope. When refugees begged for help, humans answered. When enemies asked for mercy, sometimes humans gave it. When allies doubted, humans stood firm. Slowly, races that once hated each other began to follow their lead. Small groups at first, then larger ones. This was the greatest change of all. The endless war had lasted because no one believed in unity. Humans changed that. They built bridges where no one thought they could exist. They forced enemies to sit at the same table. They reminded the galaxy that survival was not only about strength, it was about standing together. But change did not come without cost. The Krell warlords grew furious. They launched raids on human colonies, determined to crush this new threat before it spread. Whole settlements were burned. Entire families were lost. Yet humanity did not fall silent. They rebuilt. They returned to the fight stronger than before. The Varen Dominion tried to bribe them, offering power in exchange for obedience. Humanity refused. They would not become tools of an empire. The Jal scholars studied them, searching for weaknesses, convinced that a race so young must eventually collapse. But the more they studied, the more they realized there was something in humanity that could not be measured, something unpredictable, something dangerous. Battle after battle, the galaxy learned the same truth. Humanity was not the strongest, but they were the most dangerous enemy the war had ever produced. Not because of their weapons, but because they refused to stop. One Jal historian wrote, "We once believed the war itself was immortal, that it would live as long as the stars. But humanity has changed the pattern. They have made the impossible possible. For the first time, we can imagine an end." The war began to shift. In places where humans fought, empires were forced to retreat. In places where humans arrived, survivors began to rebuild. In places where humans spoke, enemies paused before drawing their weapons. It was not a complete victory. The galaxy was too vast, too broken for one race to heal it quickly. But the balance was no longer the same. The war was no longer endless. The galaxy had thought nothing could change the game. Then humanity appeared. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not the largest, but they were the spark that turned darkness into fire. And soon, everyone would have to choose: fight against humanity, or fight beside them, because one thing was certain: the humans were not leaving. The war ends, the future begins. The war had never paused. It had never slowed for mercy, never stopped for grief. But with humanity in the fight, something impossible began to take shape. For the first time in centuries, battles were not only fought to destroy, they were fought to defend. They were fought to build. Empires that had known nothing but betrayal began to see new choices. The Jal, who once claimed war was eternal, began sending emissaries to human camps. The Varen, proud and arrogant, started to copy human tactics in battle. Even some of the Krell, who had once sworn to fight until death, now sent their younger clans to stand beside the humans rather than against them. The change did not happen in one day or in one battle. It spread slowly, like light through cracks in stone, but it spread. Human fleets grew, not only because more humans joined, but because other races began to fight alongside them. Refugees who had lost everything now swore loyalty to this strange new people who carried hope like a weapon. Soldiers who had once known only endless orders found new purpose under human command. The war was no longer the same. It was not won by a single victory. It was worn down by persistence. Each battle where humans fought, the endless cycle cracked a little more. Each world they defended, the idea of peace became less impossible. Each enemy they turned into an ally, the shadow of despair grew weaker. And then, the moment came. It was not a final battle with fire that shook the stars. It was not a weapon that ended all weapons. It was silence. On the edge of the galaxy, two fleets faced each other, one led by the Varen, the other by the Krell. Both had sworn they would never surrender. But between them was a human fleet, smaller, fragile, outnumbered. Humanity did not fire. Instead, they sent a message. Not of power, not of threats, but of choice. You have fought for centuries. You have lost more than can be counted. But today you can choose. Today you can stop. The Varen listened. The Krell listened. And for reasons even they could not explain, they lowered their weapons. The war that no one thought could end. Ended. The galaxy did not cheer. It was too tired for celebration. Instead, it exhaled as if releasing a breath it had held for centuries. For the first time in memory, stars burned without fire above them. For the first time, silence was not the silence of death, but the silence of peace. But peace brought questions. Who were the humans, really? How could a race so young, so fragile, succeed where empires had failed for centuries? And what would they do now that the war was over? The Jal whispered that humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons, but because of their belief. The Varen feared that humans would rise as rulers. The Krell respected them, even as they promised that one day they would test their strength again. And the humans? They did not claim the galaxy. They did not build an empire on the ashes. Instead, they rebuilt what was broken. They repaired stations. They healed planets. They gave the galaxy something it had forgotten how to carry: hope. But in the quiet, another truth lingered. The galaxy had seen the humans end the endless war. And if they could do that, what else were they capable of? No one knew. Some believed humanity would rise as guardians. Others feared they would become conquerors. But all agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never again be the same. The endless war had found its end, and humanity had written it.